for Bethany Arts Community's celebration of Black History Month. Today we are so happy to have Joyce Rockhole, Ossining Village historian and a lifelong Ossining resident, as well as Kendra Martinez and Donna Chambers, join us as we kick off the month with the opening of our exhibit, Ossining Black History and Culture, Resilience, Dedication, and Excellence. For those of you who are not familiar with Bethany Arts Community, we are a community founded on the belief that the arts have a unique ability to inform and enhance our perception and perspective of the world, and that access to the arts at any age, and especially at an early age, and to the ability to create without fear will create more generous and caring future generations. With this as a guiding principle, and with our galleries, performance space, dance rehearsal studio, artist studios, facilities for visiting artists to stay and work while they're here in residency, we aim to inspire sharing, connection, and collaboration in a culture designed for the benefit of the community and beyond. This exhibit and the events to follow demonstrate this commitment to the community, and a phrase our founder, David Lyons, often uses when he's giving a tour of our facilities. After taking people around throughout the whole building, he looks at them and says, "You just need to imagine the possibilities. Dream and then tell us, what can't we do?" Finally, before we begin, I want to thank Peter Murdoch of Craven Jamaican and the folks at Ossining Innovates for their support of this event and the month-long exhibit and activities. So with that, I want to introduce Joyce Rockhole, the first Black historian for the Village of Ossining, a lifelong village resident whose family has been here in Ossining for 130 years. Joyce, welcome.
Thank you.
Just introduce yourself and say a little bit more, introduce everybody to who you are.
Sure. Thank you, Abby, and Bethany Arts Community. My name is Joyce Rockhole. I am the village historian. I am also a genealogist. You'll learn about how that played into this exhibit a little later. I have a great passion for research and for helping people connect with their past, with their community. I think it's very important for your rooting and learning about yourself. So this was a labor of love.
Wonderful. I can attest to the fact that it was very much a labor of love and passion, Joyce. So thank you for that. I'm also realizing that I should have shared with everybody that if you have questions, you can use the Q&A function in the tool, and we will hopefully have time to answer questions as we go through. So Joyce, can you tell us a little bit about how this exhibit came about?
Yeah, so this was actually really a couple of years in the making. So when I started doing my own family research and then became the lead researcher of the Little Bird Tea Genealogy Society founded by Shondi Speller, I started to help people with their history, finding their family history, and it became abundantly clear that there was a void. There was no real documented history in one central place that we can find out about the Black community, and people were suffering, personally with not being able to find that history. So when I became historian, and this is, after the wake of George Floyd and everyone wanted to learn more about the Black community, I started to get a lot of questions. How long have Black people been here? What contributions have they made? And this was coming from Black and white people alike. Everyone wanted to know. So my work began to just take form in researching that. And if anyone's a genealogist out there, if you go down one rabbit hole, you're down there for a while. And I've been down quite a few rabbit holes, and it would lead me to new questions. So when I came to Bethany for my tour with you, Abby, David Lyons did say, just imagine the possibilities. And that's how this got started with David and you bringing me on the tour and saying that you would give me a place to showcase the history, the undocumented history of this community of Ossining. So that's how it got started.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
You're
you. So you mentioned, Joyce, the role that genealogy and what you do with genealogy has played.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about really how you've used your genealogy tools to bring this to life?
Absolutely. So it was an invaluable tool, honestly, in doing this, because I would be researching one event and, you're looking at other facts on a page and I would find out something and because it's not documented, I can't find my way back. So as a genealogist, I always want to do a family tree on whoever my subject is. So what I would do was find out a little bit about the fact, find the family, and I would build a tree around that family. And the reason for that was for me to find someone living that was old enough to still be living that can help me with that fact that I was looking for.
Okay. Okay. And it was really finding those people living that kind of unlocked, from what I can tell, Joyce, unlocked a little bit of the floodgates.
Yeah, so what happened was, and this is where Donna Chambers comes in, I would find a fact, I would research it, and I would call Donna and other people. I mean, this is a real community effort. I would call anyone I knew. Hey, do you know someone with this last name? I'm trying to hunt down this fact. And they're like, oh, I know so-and-so. And so now we have like 5 people now on this one fact, trying to get me one living person in that family. And sometimes I was bringing information to the family that they didn't even know, that they had this clue or this evidence of a fact in their possession. So it's actually pretty cool. So not only was I discovering something for Ossining, I was discovering something for them.
Yeah. Very nice. And well, since you mentioned this is where Donna comes in, do you want to, Joyce, share and maybe Donna say a little bit about kind of why Donna was so important to bringing this exhibit to life?
Yeah, I could not have done this without Donna, honestly. Donna was really beating the pavement because she knows a lot of people, and she was able, I know that person, and she was getting on the phone and she was tracking down people and getting me photos and oral histories, because in the process of this, I was able to get some oral histories down of some elders in our community. And I mean, I'm just so excited to do that, to start capturing their voice. So I get to hear this, we get to hear this as a community in their voice. I mean, there's nothing better than that. But Donna, honestly, really was sniffing things down and getting it to me. So I couldn't have done a lot of stuff without Donna.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Donna, for doing that. What's interesting, and I'm going to kind of jump, we didn't so much talk about, but doing this kind of mix of the genealogy, map, and then finding living people was so important, because as you've told me, Joyce, multiple times, so much of this history isn't told anywhere.
No. It is very hard when you are learning, even as a child, about history and you don't see a representation of yourself. And that is the case for the Black community. When I was talking to the elders, they didn't see representations of themselves. And, it was a little heartbreaking, because I knew it was for me, but to hear it from my elders and even people that are not Black that were asking, I never knew what the contributions were. It's so very important to see a representation of yourself in history, because we all played a part in it.
Okay, and we are going to get in a moment to a little bit more of the exhibit itself. But before we do that, Joyce, the other thing that you said to me multiple times as we were talking about this and you were beginning to put this together, was that this is really an exhibit that's about Ossinings history.
Yes.
You want to say a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I am looking at one community right now because it's a commemoration of the Black community this month. But we are Ossining. When you see this exhibit, you'll see from the early years, the settlers here, we were a part of it. So we are entangled in every fact that you can find, down to the banks, to the the commerce, the entertainment. Anything that you find, we are in that genre, that we took a part in it. So we can't ignore a community that has contributed so vastly to the history. So this is not just for Black history, this is Ossining history. So it's important that everyone come or look virtually, because this is part of your history. It's just a part of the history for people that don't look exactly like you, but we all are one community.
Nicely said. Nicely said. Thank you. So let's take a moment, and if you could, Joyce, just walk people through the room. So when people come to Bethany Arts Community in Ossining to see the exhibit, what is it that they will see?
So when you come in, you're going to see our early settlers. It might be a little jarring for some people. It's going to be something you might not have known. These settlers came here not on their own. They did not, wasn't their right. They didn't choose to come here. But you're going to go through and learn a lot. You're going to walk into there's part 2 to the early settlers. And it brings me to some wonderful things in there. You're going to learn some facts about early settlers that you probably didn't know. Next, we're going to go into the military room and honor those who have sacrificed their life for our freedom. And then we're going to go into the church room. And you're just going to love this, because you're going to be welcomed into that room to the soulful sounds of the Jernigan singers. It's one of my favorite parts, is hearing that. And walking into the civic room, where we celebrate the community, but we also have to acknowledge the struggle and the fight that they had to put up in order to assimilate into this community and to be recognized as part of the community and just have the rights that everyone else had. You leave that room and you go into what I call Black Life. Where it's just a celebration of life, and we get to see Donna's beautiful quilts and her storytelling through her quilting. And then lastly, well, not lastly, but into the first room. And the first room is really important. It is the first Black person in many genres and many occupations. And being the first of anything is hard. But it has particularly challenging. It's challenging when you're the first Black person, because you have all eyes on you and they want to see if you're qualified to be in that position. And not only that, to Black people, you have them on your shoulders. You're breaking through walls, and you're making an opportunity for others. So it is a blessing and a curse at the same time, but these people have done it for us. So we have to pay homage and acknowledge the work that they have done. So then you can walk into the hallway, and I'm just so proud of these Black artists, these young Black artists. Kendra Martinez, just fantastic. Cheyenne Bell and Samari Davis, Waddy Jones, and my daughter Onike Cole. Just it takes your breath away that they express themselves so beautifully through their art. So that is our tour through through the exhibit.
Wonderful, wonderful, thank you. Okay, so that was a really fast flyover of what's in the exhibit when you come to Bethany. Let's go back to the start and to the first settlers room. And when we come into the first settlers room, well, actually, before we go to the first settlers room, Joyce, you have said several times that people have all sorts of interesting ideas about how the first
Mhm.
Black families came to Ossining. Do you
Yes.
want to just say a little bit about that?
The most entertaining one, I'll say it's entertaining, is that the Black community came here to be close to their incarcerated family members at the prison. That is absolutely not true. We have been here forever, and that's what you're going to learn when you come in. You're going to learn of the enslavement of 84 people in Mount Pleasant, because that's who we were. But you're going to learn that those were the first people here in Ossining. They did not choose to be here, but they were here. So that is the first introduction. So we're just gonna, this is a learning experience. We're gonna learn the facts. You know, it's just beautiful because now we're gonna have a good understanding of a community. So we're not, you know, passing on, because these things that were coming to me were coming from elders. So it was passed on. So let's start passing on the proper history. Let's, you know, so it's very important that they walk through this and really pay attention. This is not to be an art exhibit, is a historical exhibit. So I want you to learn. I want you to really absorb what you're seeing.
Yeah, yeah. And I think starting there makes all the rest of what we see that much more powerful. It's a reminder of the circumstances under which everything else that follows came from, which is wonderful. So we go from that first entry room and we go to the next space, which is the first settlers room, where we find the MacGyver family.
Oh, yes.
And the magical suitcase, I'd like to say. Can you tell us a little bit about the MacGyver family and really and the story of finding what's in that room?
So the MacGyver family is fantastic. They have allowed me to go into their archives to research, and I'm going to share with you what I found. But they allowed me to go into their archives and see some of their family history. And in their family history, I found a lot of our history. Like I said, it belongs to everyone. And this is in the early settlers room. They have these gorgeous hand tinted paintings that just bring that early settlers room to life. I mean, it's just gorgeous. Their family, what they have held on to all these years. And when we did some historical digging on this, these were quite expensive. This was a luxury. So it's beautiful. And in the case in front of them, it's, you know, they're the Charles H. MacIver's papers. And it's just, it is something else to see things in people's handwriting. You feel like you've connected to them and you hear their voice. So when you come and take a look in that case and really get to know this family, that inside their case, they have given us throughout the exhibit a key to answering a question that's been looming for a very long time in multiple rooms. So this magical suitcase, I want to put a cape on it because it has been a godsend. So thank you to the MacIver family, Denise MacIver, Teddy MacIver, and Carl MacIver for allowing us to share in your history. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a nice, wonderful story and an example of why sometimes keeping things for a very long time is really quite magical in the age of you know, purging everything. This is a reminder of how much you can keep in just one powerful suitcase.
Yes.
So then we go down and we go to the military room. And when we walk into that room, there are two photos on the left-hand side.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about, I mean, besides the fact that we're capturing a moment in time, you know, what are these pictures and why are they so so important?
Sure. So this is one, this picture was taken when these are draftees for World War II, they're going off to the train station, they're going off for enlistment and into the war. And what is really important for you to know about this picture is I've been researching military history for Black people for a couple of years now. And I've always seen the beginning of this march line. And I've combed everywhere, even in the Ossining books, there's the front of this line. And I could not fathom with the amount of Black people that went to war, why there wasn't a picture. I said, they absolutely they had to march at the same time as their white counterparts. So I couldn't understand why there was no picture. So when I was in that magic suitcase and I was going through it, lo and behold, here it is. Finally, after 3 years of searching, I see the back of the line. And here we have many Black men walking down the street. So this find was historical because it has not been around. I have not been able to see the back of this line. People, their families can now see their family and they can see themselves going off to war. It's so much more important than just a picture.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And then when we go through the military room, we come to a room that is in the center of so many things. We come to the church room.
Yes.
So Joyce, you want to tell us about that and some of what we're going to see when we get there?
Yeah. So the church room, as you said, that is the center of Black life, especially when we migrated here during the Great Migration before. This is where we built our community. This is where we built our strength. This is where we had our clubs, we had our meetings, our worship, everything happened at the church. Even some of the civic group meetings were held in the church. So this was the backbone and the strength of the Black community. So when you walk in here, the chairs were donated by Star Bethlehem Church. They're original to the First Star. Holy Spirit Church was amazing in what they gave to build this church. It looks like a church, and you get to see all 5 Black churches and photographs, historical, current, of all of them. And when you're in there, those soulful Jernigan singers are playing the whole time. But I think Horak Ministries, Holy Spirit Church, Star Bethlehem Church, Full Gospel Tabernacle, and unfortunately, St. Matthew's Methodist Church did not make it through. They did close down, but we were able to capture that history. So now we have it forever.
That's wonderful. And I think, Joyce, you also have a picture of a quilt that's in the church.
I do. And it was made by Donna Chambers. So I will turn that over to Donna to talk about this beautiful quilt. This picture does absolutely no justice to what she has done here.
So Donna, do you want to?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. I got to tell you, I can't see the quilt. All I can see is me and you have it. But I do know the quilt. I made the quilt. I made it for my mother. And it started out as a tribute to my mom and her grandmother. She talked about her grandmother all the time. And if you look at the quilt, so it was a process. It was, a journey. The quilt started out this way and ended up that way. In the upper left-hand corner, there's a picture of my mother's grandparents, Maud Bowman and John Bowman. And there's also a picture of their 4 children, Henry, Mary. Mary Bowman was the oldest. She was my mother's mother, my grandmother. And then below that is the picture of the Star of Bethlehem, the original building at 100, not the original, but the second building, Joyce, at
148 Spring Street.
148 Spring Street, I'm sorry. And there's one window there that was donated to the church by her grandmother. It says M.M. Bowman. And then I know the ladies, I know all of the people's name on the window except for Pastor, what was his
Banks,
name?
I think it is Banks, yeah.
And then below that is my father's grandparents, who were early settlers in Ossining also. And their names were Anna Hartwell and Edward Williams. And then I realized through my cousin that the church was kind of founded on Christmas Eve. They were worshiping at the First Baptist Church on North Island Avenue. And the minister said, you know, go ye and, you know, establish your own church. And it was the Centennial Star. And so the star in the upper right-hand corner represents the Star of Bethlehem. And then I just decided to put a Christmas tree at the bottom because it was Christmas time to liven up the quilt. And, you know, I had to give some beauty to the history. And if you look closely, there is a picture of my two grandparents and my two grandfathers there. And then my mom says, well, how come you didn't put this one? How come you didn't put that one? So in the back of the quilt, there's a pocket where she usually puts special pictures. And it was joy. She sits there and looks at it all day in her office. And my mom is 92 now. So I think she's one of our elders. And she might be listening.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Donna, so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So then, Joyce, we have the Civic Engagement Room and we have the Room of Firsts and Black Life. You want to maybe, what would you like to share? Maybe the first Black fireman? I think you had a story there.
Yeah, so the first Black fireman, this was an interesting, I think it was an interesting and an important find because even in my research for quite some time, I did read there were decades where Black people were fighting with Village to be able to be allowed to join the Ossining Fire Department. So when I did my research and found out that they did, in fact, in the late 1880s, let a Black fireman in, John W. Hoffman Sr. He started out ringing the bell. It was really an interesting story because he was the sexton to the Trinity Church, and the bell there was the fire bell. There was no fire system to alert you. And the village would pay $1 to whoever would ring the bell first. And because he lived right there, the village was giving him a lot of dollars. So he became the official bell ringer. So he was the first person to know of all the fires in Ossining. And then eventually he would respond. He would help respond to fires. And when he passed, he was the oldest, one of the oldest people in the New York State Firemen's Association. So I thought it was just an incredible find. It was just very important. And he also represented Ossining in the Civil War. He had been here that long.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to, and I know we have a couple of other things, I'm just going to remind people that if you have questions that you would like any of our panelists, Joyce or Donna or Kendra, who will get introduced a little bit more in a few moments, I ask that you just use the Q&A function. Makes it a lot easier for us to see your questions and answer them. So Joyce, I'm actually going to take one now. So we had a question about, was it unique to have an integrated group marching together at this point in history? And this was a question that came up when we were looking at in the military room and looking at the men going off to war.
So there was some separatism. There was a lot at that time, but when it came to war, when they were going off to war, they went together. They marched together. I think at that point when you're looking to leave and not know if you're coming back, who you're standing next to walking down the street really didn't make a difference.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So Joyce, well, actually, Joyce, unless there's anything else that you absolutely want me to make sure I get in now, I think what I'd like to do is take a few moments and we'll talk to Kendra about her work. And then I've got actually a question for Donna, which we'll come to. So we'll kind of switch gears here and we'll spend a little bit of time on art and the artists. Does that work for you, Joyce?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So Kendra.
I wanted to say something about the marching off to war. During some holiday recently where we posted pictures on the Ossining, if you grew up here, you came from Ossining, and there were military pictures. There was, my father was in World War II, so he was in the Navy. And I got a post from a gentleman, I don't remember who he was, but he was a white man, and he told me to give my mother his best because he marched off to war with my father. So, they all went to high school together. That's one thing, the high school wasn't segregated, so they did get to know each other through sports or through social activities, and, there were some mixers, I would think. What do you say?
There were but where there was also some mixing, there was separate. I mean, that's another topic, a whole nother one on their own, with some of the oral histories where we were told that in school they would hang together, but outside of school hours, some might not have been welcome in others' homes.
Oh, that's true. Very true. That's very true.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you, Donna. So Kendra, as I said to Kendra the other day, a name I know well and love. It's my daughter's name. Kendra Martinez is another wonderful, charming young woman. So Kendra, can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, I'm Kendra. I'm an artist I grew up in Ossining. I don't currently live there right now. Right now I live in Poughkeepsie. But I was born and raised in Ossining. All of my family's also from Ossining. And my mom actually went to school with Joyce. That's a fun fact.
It's a small world, and once in Ossining, always in Ossining.
Always.
So Kendra, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started with art?
Well, I've always loved art. Like, it's always been a part of me. Like, I want to say since like the first time I ever picked up a pencil or a crayon, whatever. And basically, once I entered 4th grade, my then art teacher, Mr. Whitehead, Ronald Whitehead, I believe that's his first name. Well, he was my art teacher then, and he had a way of explaining art and showing you the beauty in everything, that it just inspired me so much that I wanted to pursue that as a career. And ever since then, I've always loved art, and I've pretty much tried to explore every avenue of it, from drawing to painting, instruments, cello being my favorite. And even at one point in my life, I wanted to be a ballerina because I think that's like, I think ballet is like so beautiful, and the way that they can tell a story so elegantly through dance is amazing, right? But yeah, so that's basically what inspired my desire to be an artist.
All right, so go Mr. Whitehead. So also, I'm just going to ask you, before we get to having you kind of share something of piece or two that you have in the show here, you have a very sweet story about what happened that made you decide that you were really going to seriously dedicate yourself full-time to art. Can you share that? Thought it was just really sweet.
Well, so back in 2019, I was working as a pharmacy technician. Absolutely hated that job, but I was doing it. And I always have this thing where I tell my kids all the time, follow your dreams, do what makes you happy, and I will be there 1,000% to support you through everything, right? Well, my son, who loves to call me out on everything, he probably doesn't even remember saying this, but my son, he called me out and he told me, he said, how can you tell me to follow my dreams when you don't follow yours? Because this was after him asking me if my dream was to be a pharmacy technician, and I told him no. He basically called me a hypocrite. So after that, yeah, I was unhappy where I was with the job I was at. I ended up quitting that job, and I was thinking about I kept thinking about what my son said for like a few months. But then I started, at the same time, I was starting to look for other jobs. And then this is one part that I did leave out of that story. I actually did get hired at another job during those few months where I was contemplating what I should do with my life after being called out by at the time, how old is he now? At the time, 7-year-old. So, no, he was 8. I lied. So I was contemplating what I should do with my life, and I did get hired at another job during that time frame and got fired before I started. So that's when I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna, well, also with a push from my husband to do it, I decided I'm just gonna go follow my dreams and do what I want to do. Because how can I really sit here and tell my kids to follow their dreams when I'm not doing it?
Yeah. That's wonderful. And I'm going to ask you, Kendra, if maybe Joyce, if you could show us Respect the Drip, exactly. And Kendra, can you tell us a little bit about this piece that has a real spot of honor in this show?
Gladly. Okay, so that is basically an ode to the way I grew up, the people that surrounded me, and the culture, and like our culture, right? It, ow, my back, sorry. It was basically a representation of the music we listen to, this, like, our style, our vernacular, basically everything that makes us who we are, right? And I wanted to show it in a way that I guess people would understand and relate to. Yeah.
It's a beautiful piece, Kendra.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. So, and Kendra has other pieces in the exhibit as well. Kendra, do you want to just take maybe one moment and tell us about Blue Moon? And then I want to get to a quilt of Donna's. And then we have a number of questions in the here for us. So can you just tell us briefly about Blue Moon?
Okay, so Blue Moon, if you know me, then you know I'm a very spiritual person. That being said, from a spiritual standpoint, the moon represents feminine energy, right? So Blue Moon was basically, if you see it, you'll see the behind, like, every female is a moon. So basically it was just a representation of the feminine energy of the moon.
Okay,
If you can, Kendra, talk about the textures. I mean, this piece is absolutely stunning. If you can get to Bethany to look at this, I mean, this picture is doing no justice. It's stunning. It really is quite stunning.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yes.
you're right.
So,
Kendra, do you want to just tell us really quickly kind of what materials you use for this piece?
So the paint itself is acrylic, but I also, the strips you see on everything, that's glitter, and the moon was very tedious. Those are glass. That's made of, I glued the glass on there piece by piece. So that took a little while.
Wow. And Joyce is right that you know, seeing it in real person, seeing it and hung on the hall really does look, in the hallway really does look beautiful. So thank you. So thank you, Kendra. Donna, I think we have one more of your quilts. Joyce, do we have one more of Donna's quilt? And maybe Donna, if you could talk a little bit about this. And I'm going to ask, we had a question here in the Q&A, which now, so somebody asked, how long does it take Donna to make her quilts? So maybe can you tell us a little bit about this piece and then share how you kind of what it takes to put it together.
I wanted to thank and congratulate Kendra. I love her work. And keep on keeping on, you know, follow your dream. I've been doing art since I was in Ossinings High School. But this piece is one of the first quilts I've done. I started quilting in about maybe 12 years ago. I'm a jeweler by trade, but I used to sew all of my life. And this piece, it's called Praise Dancing. And it was my first quilt. And I just was looking for bright colors. I didn't have this in my mind. The fabric just spoke to me, and it turned out this way. It's a traditional quilt block that's called a log cabin. The center of each block has the green in it, and it represents, you know, if you were to see there's a long quilt in the front of the show, which tells about the Underground Railroad. And a log cabin quilt means that there's a safe house coming. But, you know, I just used it and I did my thing. I got creative and I put the dancers in the center. You know, it was a great experience. It made me keep wanting to quilt. And I thank you, you ladies.
Well, Donna, your quilts, I saw the images. Joyce shared them early on, just, you know, images, and I thought they're beautiful, but they are stunning when you see them in person. So Donna, one more question for you. Mm-hmm. Do you make your quilts solo, somebody's asking, or do you quilt in a group?
Oh, I make them solo, but I do have a quilt group that I belong to that they usually meet in Katona or Somers at JFK High School or Kennedy Catholic. And there's about 100 ladies in the quilt group. And, you know, we have all kinds of activities. We have a yearly quilt show that's held at Southern Connecticut University in Danbury. And, you know, we have comfort quilt groups where we make quilts for, you know, people in need of love and comfort, and they're sad and they just need something just to make them feel better. So consequently, this quilt group fills a lot of voids in my life, and it helps a lot of others. And during the COVID, it was amazing. Yeah, I just quilted all day. Couldn't go anyplace, just quilted all day.
Yeah, Wonderful. And we had a question here, actually two questions about whether any of Donna's quilts are for sale. And yes, in fact, a few of them are. So we encourage you to come on in and take a look. They really are spectacular. So thank you, Donna.
Thank you. Thank you.
Help and for
Opportunity.
So I'm going to go through Joyce and ask, pick a couple of these questions to ask you. We've got some great questions here. So somebody has asked what tools you use to build the family trees.
Okay, so when I'm building a family tree, I start with ancestry.com, familysearch.com. I go into vital records, and it depends. So I start start with Ancestry to build it, and then I'm using every available online resource. Because of COVID, we can't get into a lot of clerk's offices, depending on where I have to search, but I use all of those tools. So as a certified genealogical researcher, I dig pretty deep.
Okay, all right, thank you. Let's see, we also have a question. Well, we have somebody who's asked if we can talk a little bit more about the slave history in Ossining. And the comment here is, I think it's always such a surprise to folks in the North that slavery was not just present in the South. It's not always, or as they say, it's a chapter that's erased. So do you want to just tell us? I mean, this in and of itself, I think, could be an entire, and probably should someday be an entire webinar. But maybe do you want to just touch a little bit on it, Joyce, here?
Sure. So yes, we had slavery in New York. We did have slavery here. New York, so the North had slavery, but was abolished earlier, but New York was one of the last of the northern states to abolish it. And we didn't have a complete abolishment of slavery. It was a gradual one. They didn't want to just, stop it completely. So the end of, I think it was 1797, I'm on little sleep, but I know it's the end of 17. And it took 27 years for them all to be emancipated. So it was like an algorithm. If you were born after, I think it was 1799, then you were free, but if, you had to be indentured for 27 years. So that's why they really say that the slavery was over in New York in 1827, because you had that period of indentured servitude that they had to fulfill in order to be free, to be manumitted. So we did here, when we were part of Mount Pleasant, have slaves that were here. We will learn about slave Ellen. That's a story that you will learn coming soon about slave Ellen. That was actually stolen from the South and smuggled into Ossining. So that is a story coming to you about slavery in New York, and not just New York, here in Ossining.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think that something that Joyce has said is really important. This exhibit is going to continue to grow, and there'll be stories added to it in the days and weeks to come. And so we encourage you to come here, as we've said before, and to see the exhibit in person and to watch as those stories emerge. We also had a question about, or a comment and question saying, the history is incredible. Is there a way that Ossining Public Schools incorporate or plan to incorporate this in their curriculum? So Joyce, do you want to explain what's going on there real quickly?
Yeah, so the Ossining School District has been fantastic. They did reach out, and they will be working with myself and Bethany on filming the exhibit. It's going to take all day, I believe, right, Abby? It's an all-day event where they're going to film a walkthrough of the exhibit to make a production that they can pass on to the kids for years to come. And I have made worksheets for some of these facts for children. So they will be getting access to that as well.
Okay, wonderful. I think that's That's an important part. So we have another question actually about genealogy, Joyce.
Mhm.
So the question is, how does one become a certified genealogy researcher?
I went to Boston University for genealogical research. It's a very intensive course. I had a few crying moments in that course, but it is well worth it. If you have a passion for just researching and you would like to be a super sleuth and you like to figure things out, then this is a career path that you might enjoy. So you do go to school. I know Boston University has it, and there are a few other places. I believe there's not a ton that you can become a certified genealogical researcher.
Okay, all right, wonderful. There's also, I'm going to ask just one more question here. Somebody's asked about the early schools for Black students in Ossining, and were these schools started by the Black church? Do you know, Joyce?
I've never heard of that, so someone's about to take me down a rabbit hole to see if something was going on I didn't know about. But there were neighborhood schools, so you were going to school near your home, and people were living, in communities for the most part with people that look like them. So you might had some integration, but it might not have been a ton. So you'll see a lot of, and I post a lot too, and other Ossining people, when you see the earlier days and you'll see a class picture, you may see only 1 or 2 Black people in the photograph.
Okay, okay. And if the individual who's asked that question knows anything themselves about schools in the Black church in the early days of Ossining, I'd say, let us know, reach out.
What I will say about the Black church is they did a lot to ensure further education of Black history. When I was looking at this, even early on in the 20s and the 30s, them bringing in Black historians to teach the Black community, and they really stressed learning it and the reason for learning it, for self-esteem, for empowerment, and just everything, just to make you better citizens, to make you more proud of who you are and where you come from. There really is, and I say it over and over again, there is power in knowing who you are.
Yeah. Thank you, Joyce.
You're welcome.
So I know that we are coming up on an hour. It's hard to believe. We have a question about just making appointments to see the exhibit. So if you go to our website at bethanyarts.org, you'll be able to see that. And you can, there is an online tool which you can use. We ask that if you're coming in a group, that you come kind of with a group that, maybe you reside with, or with a smaller group. We are following safety protocols here and taking about 10 people total during a time slot. But you can find all of that information up on bethanyarts.org when you go there. And I'm just gonna see, yeah, I think that's pretty much, we're out of time. The other thing I'm gonna do is encourage everybody to go to the website, bethanyarts.org. We have a number of events that are coming up. A number of talks, a couple of concerts, and a class. So I'm just going to share with everybody really quickly that the next event is next Saturday, February 13th at 5 o'clock. And this is an artist talk called Table Wizard Spinny Spin and the Separate 5 MCs, The Untold Story of the Beginning of Ossining Hip Hop Culture with Spencer Thomas. Then on February 19th, we have the Harlem Renaissance, A Golden Age. It's an online class with Dr. Jill Kiefer. And then on February 20, we have an evening of music and talk with Ossining's own Ted Daniel, accomplished trumpeter and wonderful Ossining resident, And then there are 3 more events to follow after that. So again, we encourage everybody to check out bethanyarts.org, see what those events are, register in advance, and join us. They are all free. So I'm also going to say, though, that we can't do what we do without the generous support and donations from those people who come and see and enjoy what we do here at Bethany. So while you register, if you can take an extra moment and donate, we would be really much appreciative. So thank you.
Yes.
So Donna Chambers, thank you so much for everything that you've done. Kendra Martinez as well, both of you for bringing the walls of Bethany to light with beautiful, beautiful art.
Thank
And
you.
Joyce, thank you so much for everything you've done here. I still remember, thanks to Dana White, who made the introduction. Shout out to our former village historian, Dana, who introduced me to you. I remember our first conversation, and I'm so glad that we met and we had that conversation. And I'm so glad that you're so committed to really unearthing this part of our community's history and telling those stories. And I know putting together your first exhibit was, there was a lot for all of us to learn together. And I thank you and appreciate everything you've done to make this exhibit happen. So thank you.
And thank you, before we leave, to you and Bonnie. Oh my gosh, you have halos on your head. I just have to tell everyone. And Donna, I really just couldn't, and your husband, David, and my husband is just amazing. And I just want to say to the Ossining community, thank you for stepping up. It was just amazing.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we hope to see you here at Bethany Arts Community soon.
Bye.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.